behind closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.
My favorite teacher is Mr. Wilson. No explanation needed.
Mr. Shea.
Mrs. Brett and Mr. Leibowitz.
Dr. Lighthold.
Mrs. Marino.
Brandon Billets.
Brandon Billets.
Brandon Billets? I don't even know who that is, but shout out Brandon Billets.
Mr. Kruger. Mr. Monero, because he has a very passionate love for the Amish, and I think that's interesting.
My favorite teacher is Coach Fluck.
The man, Mr. Brewster.
Houston.
Mrs. Shoppy.
Mr. Reichwin's the best teacher of North Penn, you know.
Miss Anthony.
Shout out to Mr. Brumbaugh.
Both Mr. Henrys.
Mr. Michael Rio.
Mrs. Dummeldinger. Mrs. Castle.
Mrs. Stokes.
Hair Baker.
Mr. Mazzaro.
Mr. Brumball.
Miss Wilkin.
Mr. Werner.
Mr. Mostert times Dr. D8.
Miss Crawford.
Mama Kratz.
Mr. Heller and Mrs. Westerland.
Shout out to you, Mr. Tumalo.
Oh my God, there's so many.
Miss Burford.
Miss Brett.
Mrs. Wakefield.
Mr. Heller.
Mr. Reichwein.
Mr. Mostert.
Mr. Brumball.
Mr. D'Angelo and Mrs. Kriebel.
Mr. Bavell.
Mr. Bovell.
Senor Atkiss.
Mrs. Cooney. Hey, Townsend, you're my fave.
Mr. Homan.
But behind closed doors, I'm a